to that panel that was up here just a couple minutes ago. I was backstage like mentally taking notes, and it was so funny because I was thinking, you know, they're talking about like dividing the day in half. Am I tracking all the day? I'm like, those are my people. Like that is, it was good. Well, as you heard, my name is Kindra. I am so excited. You can probably tell already that I'm very excited to be here with all of you. And as you heard in my introduction, I am a professional storyteller, which I don't know if any of you have, maybe this sounds familiar to you, but you know when people ask you what you do, and you say, oh, I'm a coach, or oh, I'm a professional storyteller, like it takes them a minute to figure out, right? Like they don't know right away, they don't know right. So I was sitting on a plane a couple of weeks ago next to a gentleman, and it was at the end of the flight where we all took our headphones off. You're probably better at that, you talk the whole time, but we were finally at that point where we had to say words to each other. And we did that mandatory, like, oh, is this where you're headed? Where are you from? And what do you do? So I asked him, he asked me, I said, I'm a professional storyteller. And he went, oh. Like he knew what that was. But then he gave himself away because he said, so how did you, where did you, what, and what he really wanted to say is like, how do you get that job? Because it sounds made up. And it is, so we'll get that right out in the open, right here. I made up my job, but the truth is I came by this profession of professional storytelling. Quite honestly, I told my very first story when I was 11 years old, and I was in 5th grade. Now, I don't know if any of you have 5th graders or remember being in 5th grade, but 5th grade was not my best year. Right, because for a couple of reasons. The first one was I was recovering from a really bad haircut from 4th grade. Do you remember, now I'm going to date Mike, do you remember the movie Hook? Right, with Julia Roberts, and she had on that like really cute pixie wig. Well, my mom thought that would look great on my bone structure, that pixie, so she cut all of my hair off, and then I spent the next year explaining to people that I was indeed a female, because there was no other way, right? Like I was 11, like, so that was really bad. But also in 5th grade, it's like that first time that you really, and we have these moments all throughout our lives. You might be in one of these moments right here, right now. But it was one of those moments where I was first trying to discover like who I was, like what my voice was, what my contribution would be. And it's awkward, right? Because you try to be somebody else for a little bit, and that doesn't work. And then you try to be yourself, and you're not sure if that's. And so I was dealing with that. And to make matters even worse, I had this best friend who had it all figured out. I mean, the girl was flawless, perfect. So I mean, I loved her. She was my best friend. But I kind of hated her too. Like right? Like she was, first of all, she was beautiful. She had this long blonde hair, long being the operative word, and then these big brown eyes that could like turn green when she needed them to. It was the weirdest, like it would just be, and they would just like turn it different. And all of the girls loved her because she was kind and she was loyal, and the teachers loved her because she was engaged and funny, and the boys, I mean, if a 5th grade boy could go to a tattoo parlor and get a girl's name tattooed across his arm, they all would have done it because even her name was perfect. Molly. And my name was I mean, it was a bad, right? I remember walking down those wide elementary school hallways, side by side with Molly, and the principal would come walking towards us like the most powerful man in the school. And I remember every time he would stop and he would do this thing with his fingers. He would go, "Hey, Molly, Molly." And looking back right now, it was like the 90s, so it was different. It was a different time back then. Not so appropriate now. But he would always go, "Hey, Molly, Molly," and then he would just like keep walking, like I wasn't even there, and it wasn't his fault, it wasn't Molly's fault, but I remember sitting around our kitchen table crying to my mother, just wishing I could have whatever it was that Molly had. I wanted what she had. I never figured out what it was that she had, but, so spoiler alert, you're not going to find out either, because I still don't know, what I did find was later that year, we had an assignment. It was a storytelling assignment. We were each supposed to read and learn like a children's book, and then read it to a 3rd or 4th grade class. And so I chose the book, The Giant's Big Toe. It's a classic, ladies. I can't believe you've never heard of it. So I got The Giant's Big Toe, and I remember reading it and thinking, this is pretty good, but maybe I could do something with it. So I added some characters, a little bit of drama, some story elements. And I remember standing in front of my first 3rd grade classroom. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried to get the attention of a room full of 3rd graders. Almost as difficult as trying to get the attention of adults with cell phones, right? Like it's this thing, they were like bouncing off the walls and like picking bugs off each other. The teacher was in the back of the room like, when is the bus gonna come? So right at the end of the day. And I remember putting the book down and just telling the story. And within the first few sentences, I held those 3rd graders in the palm of my hand. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like the power, right? But even right then, 11 years old, I wondered if maybe I was onto something. And the truth is, I didn't go back to 5th grade. After that, I was on tour. Like, my name was in lights. Kindra is the Giant's Big Toe, which wasn't great for my reputation or popularity, but still, like, I went to every single 3rd and 4th grade classroom telling that story, watching it transform people, giving me that voice that I'd been looking for. And I'll never forget the day at the very end of school, walking down those wide elementary school hallways, side by side with my best friend Molly, who I didn't have to hate anymore. And the principal came walking towards us, right? And he did that thing, you can't help himself, like, hey, Molly, Molly, like it just was. And then he looked at me and he said, Kindra, I heard you told some great stories today. Keep it up. And so I did. And now I'm here. I would have dropped out of high school, like elementary school, right then and there, become a professional. My dad's still a little bit upset that this is what I do. It's a little bit difficult for him to understand. No, I did go to college. I got my master's degree, where my thesis was on the role of storytelling in organizational socialization. And you know this as the leaders, that organizations, teams, aren't built based on the manuals or the instructions that you give them, but rather the stories that you tell them. I was then a director of marketing and VP of sales, and when I was my best was when I was telling stories. When my team was their best was when they were telling stories. So I quit that job. I had a couple kids. They're super cute. And now this is what I get to do. Work with individuals like you, with big companies, with people with big dreams, to help you harness the power of your irresistible stories. And that is what we're going to do here today. Are you ready? All right. Let's do this. Here is how the rest of our time is going to break down together. I want to give you an overview. First, in order for you to harness the power of your stories, you have to first understand why storytelling works so well. Now, I know the speaker, Annie, earlier today, she had a great resume of storytelling. I mean, this is great stuff, right? But I'm storytelling now, the surpassed buzzword status. It's great for me, job security. My dad's finally proud of me, almost. But not so good for all of you, because we don't even know why storytelling works, or, which is the next section we'll talk about, what a story actually is. So we have a few case studies for you to take a look at. And then lastly, I want to give you some foolproof storytelling strategies you can use to start telling better stories today. And not only that, this isn't just about you. I want you to take everything you learn here and bring it back home and teach it to your team. You have dual responsibilities in this room, but the transformation it will make in your team as a whole will be profound. Okay, so let's do this. First, why? Why does storytelling work so well? Well, there are a lot of reasons. The first one is really easy. It's because humans like stories, right? And I know that sounds like a gimme, but stories are what we want to hear. And let's take a look at this in a marketing sense, right? Like you're marketing your business, you're sharing your message, you're drawing people in. Let's take a look at this on one of the biggest marketing stages that there is in our country, the Super Bowl. Can we agree that that's a pretty big marketing stage, right? It's like $5 million for 30 seconds. So researchers wanted to see if they could figure out what made a great Super Bowl commercial. So they did a 2-year analysis of Super Bowl commercials, and they coded those commercials against 3 different variables. The first variable were those that told a story. The commercial had like a beginning, a middle, and an end, a narrative arc, emotions, characters to care about. So those that told a story. The second variable was those that used celebrity endorsements. This is my favorite slide of the whole presentation. Like I could just, can you see the blue in his eyes from the back of the room? Yeah, okay. So celebrity endorsements, and then those commercials that use cute furry animals. I know, I can tell. Some of you prefer this slide to the one before it. I cannot help you. Like that is your own problem. I'm not gonna. All right, so which one of these 3 variables do you think performed the best? Yeah, no, it's not the puppy. You guys, I'm not gonna put this up here unless it works in my favor. So it's those that told a story. Now, I want you to think back. This was done in like 2014. So let's take a trip down memory lane. Do any of you remember who played in the Super Bowl in 2014? Maybe. Do you remember the biggest commercial of the 2014 Super Bowl? Maybe. But if I say, do you remember the commercial with the puppies and with the puppy and the horses? Oh, you do? Oh, you remember that 30 seconds from 4 years ago? Right? Budweiser didn't even mention beer. All they did was tell a story, and it was the most viral commercial of that Super Bowl and all Super Bowls since then. So think about this. You know that this, what you're doing, now that we have these online platforms, now that this is where you're reaching people, stories, because humans want to tell stories or hear stories, that is what they will share. That is what they connect with. You don't need $5 million or Bradley Cooper, though we all kind of need Bradley Cooper. They're not putting the picture back up on the screen, but I have him right here in front of me. He's like looking right at me. All you need, there he is, for the rest of you doing it. All you need are the stories that you can tell. Okay, so that's the first reason storytelling works so well. The second reason, and this is particularly important for you as you grow your teams and as you teach the coaches beneath you how to grow their teams, stories have the unique ability to change the conversation from the thing to what the thing will do for somebody. How many of you or your team members sometimes struggle with price conversations? Do any of you have those challenges? Right, like how much it costs or how much it is, right? And don't you get so frustrated? Because if they only understood the true value of what you had to offer, the price wouldn't matter so much. What we need in those moments are the stories. Anthropologists actually wanted to put this to the test. They wanted to see what people buy. Do they buy the thing, or do they buy the story of the thing? So here's what they did. They gathered 200 objects. They were like little knickknacks, so essentially not worth much. You can see they spent a total of $250. So they gathered these little knickknacks, and they put each one of them up on eBay with a story to see what people would pay for them. Let's take a look. Here is a used number 4 tile. You can see the size of it compared to the penny. You can get a new one of these with flowers painted on it at like the Home Depot for $6, okay? So just so you know, they paid $1 for it. They put it up on eBay with the story. And the story was of a couple who had, was like building a swimming pool. Have any of you ever remodeled a home with a partner or a spouse? Yeah, the story didn't end well, but it was a cute story, it was a funny story. And this was supposed to be like the 4-foot marker in the pool where the water level was. Someone bought this tile for $88. Let's take a look at another one, shall we? This is a used pink horse. Clearly from the 80s, judging by its very large hair. It's got a wild mane there. They paid $1 for this used pink horse. They put it up on eBay with a story, and the story was of a mother whose daughter had gone off to college, and she was starting to consolidate some of her daughter's things, and she remembered how her daughter loved to, play with this horse on the windowsills. It was her hope that whoever purchased this horse, that their daughter would enjoy it as much as her daughter had. Sweet story. Someone bought this horse for $104.50. I know! Can you, okay, so you get the, let's just look at one more because this is my favorite one. This is a globe paperweight. Now, I am not a huge paperweight aficionado, but if you look at it compared to the size of the pen, it's kind of small. Like it would hold like one piece of paper in a light breeze. So there you go. Okay. But so they bought the paperweight for $1.49. They put it up on eBay with this story. And the story was of a woman who had fallen in love. And together they traveled the world. And every city they went to, every stop they made, he would buy her a little treasure, a little knick-knack as a symbol of this great love and adventure that they shared. And that relationship had ended. And the woman was heartbroken. And she finally decided it was time to start a new story. And slowly but surely, she sold each one of her little treasures. And this was the last one. I know, I'm trying to keep a straight face. And it was her hope that whoever purchased this mediocre paperweight would experience the same sense of love and adventure she had once felt and hoped to find again. Someone bought this paperweight for $197.50. Who thought it was going for more? Like, who thought this was a right? Like, you were about to pay, like, I would have paid $400 for this paperweight. So the question is, what do we buy? We don't buy the thing. We buy the story of what the thing will do for us, what it will mean in our lives. Whoever bought this paperweight wasn't buying a paperweight. They were buying the story of love and adventure and hopefulness. And for $197.50, that is a pretty good price. I've tried to buy it for cheaper. It doesn't work well, okay? So remember, whether it's you or your team members, we don't buy the thing. We buy the story of what the thing will do for us. And so if your team is finding themselves getting stuck in these price conversations or not understanding the true value of what it means to be Beachbody, you're not telling the right story or a story at all. Now, it wouldn't be very fair for me to show this to you and not give you the final results. So you can see that they spent $250. They made $8,000. That is a 100% increase on their efforts. I don't know if any of you are interested in a 100% increase in your... Now let me say this. I am not... So my husband said, Kindra, why do you travel around teaching people about storytelling? Why don't you just put junk up on eBay with the story? So that's not the point, right? We're not talking about putting stuff up on eBay with a story. What we're saying is a story has the ability to change that conversation from dollars to value, which is a very important shift to make, particularly in this business, whether it's product or opportunity. Okay, last reason storytelling works so well, and Andy touched on this earlier this morning, but stories are uniquely memorable. They have a way of burying themselves in our psyche, and they stay with us longer. Now, there's a reason for that, and that is this. The storytelling process is a co-creative one. All right, so as I am telling you my story, for example, you are creating your own version of it in your mind. You're taking my words, yes, but you're adding your images to it, and together we're creating this shared space. And because you took a part in putting that together, it stays with you longer. Let me ask you, how many of you, when I was talking about my best friend Molly, pictured one of your, like the Molly in your life, or your best friend today, do you picture her? Yeah, or how many of you, when I was talking about the elementary school hallways, could you picture the elementary school hallways that you walk down, right? Yes, you're nodding your heads because I know what I'm doing up here. So, okay, because I am giving you this information in the form of a story, it will stay with you longer. And I don't know about you, but I don't go to work every day. I don't take this crazy entrepreneurial journey. I'm an entrepreneur myself, right? To have things go in one ear and out the other. I am here to leave a legacy. You are here to make a difference. How do you make that difference stick? You share it in the form of a story. Rudyard Kipling said it, if history were taught in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten. And then let me ask you, just between you and me here, how many of you have ever had a team member, for example, and you teach them how to do something one time, and then again, and then again, and then again, right? And they keep coming back with the same challenge. If you want the solution to stick, use story. Whew. Okay, even all that being said, on all the great things that storytelling does, there is a problem, and that is when the stakes are highest, or when we're getting ready to post something on Facebook or Instagram, we often forget to tell the story, or we skip it. I know this as well as anyone. I've been working on my Instagram feed, and sometimes I just want to put a quick caption like walking into the weekend like. It's just, right, come on, you do the same thing, because you're like, I'm going to post something I want to do, and I just want to, and it's me just like walking. I don't even know what that is. Like, that's not, right? But because the thing is telling good stories takes more work. It does. It takes more work. But that work is worth it. When I put that extra effort in to writing actual stories on my Instagram feed, and I dare you today to go look at my Instagram, and you'll see the ones where I tell a story and the ones where I don't, and the engagement, the difference in engagement is insane. It is worth every word to include a story. So that's the shift I want you to make as you are putting your message out there, to shift to a storytelling default. And additionally, as you're working with your teams, instead of thinking, what information could I give them, what story could I tell them, okay? But in order to do that, it's really important that we first understand what a story actually is. And in order to do that, I want to first talk about what a story isn't. And this slide that I'm about to show you can get a little awkward. So just stay with me, we'll get through it, okay? Here's what a story is not. You know the first one. It's not a list of results or features. A story is not well-placed emojis. Just like a bunch of, here's a smiley face, and here's some sunglasses, and here's, a donut. I used the donut one the other day. I thought that was great. Nothing happened when I used the donut emoji, right? So it's not well-placed emojis. That doesn't, how many of you have ever, felt yourself engage, falling into the co-creative process, starting by looking at a list of emojis? That just doesn't happen. Again, it's not just a photo. A photo is not worth 1,000 words. Put the words in there. It's not a bullet point list of whatever it might be, and it's not that vague business, high-level buzzwords or entrepreneurial jargon like, I am so passionate about bringing light and love to the world. How many of you say it, right? Or okay, so here's an example. I was working with a woman, similar to you, building a business similar to yours. And one of the reasons that she builds her business, one of the reasons she's engaging in this opportunity is to spend more time with her children and her family. How many of you, is that one of the things you say, right? Gives me time freedom, financial freedom, more time with my family. And so whether she was on her Zoom calls or maybe one-on-one, she would always say, oh, spend time with my family. But what did that mean? Do you feel the co-creative process starting when she says spending time with my family? So we made a little shift. And she thought about a time where that really mattered to her. And it was a couple years ago. She was working full-time, and at her kids' school, there was this day called Author's Day every year, where all the kids would get dressed up either as a favorite character from a favorite book or a favorite author. And it was a big deal. You worked on the costumes, you had to give a little presentation, and every year she would dress her kids up and do the whole thing. She would bring them to school, she would drop them off, and she would go to work. And about halfway through the day, she would start getting text messages, and they would be pictures of her kids in their Author's Day costumes that the other mothers had taken and sent to her. And it was heartbreaking, because she wanted to be the one taking the pictures. And so one day she decided to dive deeper into her business, to work harder, to engage more, and over time she was able to earn enough financial freedom that she could leave that position. And the next author day, she went to school and stayed. And yes, her phone was filled with pictures of her kids on Author's Day, but they were pictures she took herself. That story is a story about what that means to be able to spend more time with your kids. So that's the shift we want to make. Instead of just talking about it, to telling the story of it. So here's what a story actually is then. A story happens, and this slide is not a story, this is a bullet point list, okay? So there's a time and a place, but let's just say, all right, so a story happens in a particular moment. It happens that moment when you go into the dressing room and you have to keep asking for smaller sizes, right? It happens the moment that you get to take the pictures of your kids at Author's Day. It happens the moment that one of your coaches comes to you and says, "You have changed my life." A story happens in a moment. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to a story. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but there's this shape to a story. There are emotions in a story, not just information, and they don't have to be big. They can be curiosity or hope. They don't have to be huge emotions. We have very small emotions every day. Lastly, they're characters to care about and something at stake. Okay, so all that being said, what I'd like to do for you here is really show you the difference, the power a story can make. And I want to show you a before and after video of a brand who thought they were telling a story and then what happened when they actually did. Now you can see from the photo here that this has nothing to do with what you do. This is a purse company. But this is the video that this young woman, this entrepreneur, put up on her website that told her story. I hope you can tell by the very large air quotes that she does not tell a story, okay? But I'm going to show you this before video, and afterwards I'm going to ask you what you think of it, all right? Let's do it.
Talk to me. Talk to me. Close your eyes. Okay. Breathe.
All right, ready? Yeah.
What does the Journey Collection mean to you? It means I'm being who I was born to be. I'm creating and I'm designing and I'm living my dreams, and this is the ripple effect of just finally getting to the place of doing what I so passionately love and want to be. A lot of people view me as the girl who lost my parents in college, and I was a girl that was supposed to carry on Paisan and Joyce's legacy, but deep down, I want to be me. I want to be Jennifer Page. I want people to look at me and be like, she listened to her own intuition, she listened to her heart, and she followed her dreams. Soul Cure is a fashion brand and it designs handbags, but it's so much more than that. I want it to be about encouraging young people to be who they are, to follow their dreams, and to not get swept up in the white noise, but to know that if there's something that they want to do, to go after it and do it with all their heart and all their passion. If you're doing what you're meant to do, you will get there.
Okay, so what'd you think? This is my favorite part. So let me ask, how many of you thought that was actually pretty good? Right? But you know it's the before video. Yeah, so you know it's the bad one. Right? So you don't want to say there was pretty good. And you heard in there, I mean, that could have been you, right? Talking about following your dreams, which I believe as I was listening to that panel up here, I was like, yeah, like, you don't follow anybody else's rules. Like, you get to live your life how you want to live it, which is essentially what she's saying. Tune out the noise, pursue your passion, do what you're meant to do. But she didn't tell a story. Okay? She talked around a story, and this is the thing I want you to remember. This is the biggest mistake we make when we start trying to use stories in our business, or your team is trying to tell their stories. We allude to the story, but we don't actually tell it. We allude to a story. We mention there's a story there, but we don't actually tell the story, so we don't get to reap all of the benefits that we just spent the whole first part of this presentation talking about. Let me ask you, how many of you, watching that video, thinking back to it, heard what the story might have been? Did you hear when she said it? What was it? Her parents. How many of you heard her say, when I lost my parents, right? You heard her say that, right? And didn't your brains, when she said that, go like this? Just a little bit. Because your brain wants to hear a story, but she didn't tell the story, so you didn't really pay attention, and we all kept going along and no one was the wiser for it, and what we got was a pretty good video. The question is, what difference would telling the story actually make, and how you feel about this brand, and how you feel in general? Good news, you don't have to wonder. We have an after video. I hear before and afters are an important part of business. So we have an after video. We got together with Jen. We reshaped this video so that she actually told the story, and I want you to see if you can tell the difference telling the story makes.
I suppose my story starts like anyone else's. My parents wanted what was best for me and not to have to experience the struggles that they did. I pursued a business degree, and then afterwards I planned to pursue law school. Then when I was 21, my life changed. I woke to find myself hanging upside down by my seatbelt. My family's SUV had flipped over several times, hitting the base of a concrete billboard before coming to a stop. Both my parents were taken from me that day. My mom was killed instantly, and my dad died hours later in the hospital. I knew that saying goodbye to two people I loved would be hard, but what I wasn't expecting was how hard the aftermath would be. Everyone was wondering what I would become in light of this tragedy. There was a lot of pressure, scrutiny, a lot of noise. I'll never forget the last words my mother said to me. She was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and seconds before the accident happened, she turned around and she said to me, "Where do you want to go?" The next moment was chaos, and she never even got to finish that sentence. But her voice, that question, "Where do you want to go?" is forever frozen in my memory. I decided the best way to honor my parents is to find the answer that worked for me, for Jennifer Page, not for anyone else. Soul Carrier is the manifestation of that. Every handbag I design is created to serve as a daily reminder, to ignite people to do what they're meant to do. I don't know where you'll be when someone asks you that question, "Where do you want to go?" Or if you will have to ask it of yourself. But when that day comes, I hope that Soul Carrier can be a reminder to tune out the noise and to choose the path you were meant for.
Could you tell the difference? So think about this. Like when she was first, I mean, that story seems to like write itself. But when she was first putting it together, she didn't even really think of telling this story. And then so when she started telling it for a while, Jen was getting more speaking engagements than I was, which was irritating. But you know, like people wanted to. Now when you're carrying a Soul Carrier bag and someone compliments you on it, you can't help but retell her story. Here's the thing, with every story you tell, you are equipping the people you're telling it to, your team members, with a tool that they can use going forward to continue to spread your message in a very tangible way. Now, there are two people that I want to talk to in this room after playing that video, because there's something really important both of you need to know. First of all, the person who watched that video and thought, I have that story, I have a story that big, I have a story that difficult, I don't know if I can tell it, To you I say, wait. Some of these stories take time before they're ready to be told. And please pass that information on to your team members, your coaches, as well. The second person I want to talk to is the person who watches that video and is like, I don't have a story that big. Like there's been, I just kind of found this and went with it, and it's been, and to you I say, it isn't the magnitude of the story that matters. It's the decision to tell a story that makes the difference, okay? So, now that you know what a story is and what it isn't, what I'd like to do for you here is help you create that own transformation and teach you it in a systematic way so that you can bring it back to the coaches on your team to give you some specific foolproof storytelling strategies you can use when you go back home. You go home tomorrow, right? Because there's a party tonight, right? I know, I heard about the party. I didn't bring out the right outfit for the party, but okay. So, now I don't know if anyone in here is type A. I can't imagine that you are like me. If you are, we can meet out there later and make lists together and like cross things off of it. I'm happy to do that. But for those of you who are type A, I don't want you to get stressed out about what's about to happen next. This is going to be kind of a crash course in storytelling. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to get the slides. So you don't have to write them all down. So you can take out your cell phones and open up your text messaging and text the phone number 33444. Like, that's my phone number. It is not. And I won't get your phone number either, which I'm really bummed about, because earlier today I was sitting in the back of the room and watching you guys like walk in and out, and I was like, this is the best dressed group of people I've ever seen, even in your workout clothes. Like, I just, like, so anyway, I'd love to keep talking. All right, so now that you have the number, and in the message, write all one word of Beachbody story. Hit send. I'm going to text you back and ask you for your email address. Text me your email address, and I'm going to email you a PDF of these slides. Not only that, you'll have my email, so you can ask me questions, and I love hearing about your storytelling successes. And secondly, I send out weekly storytelling videos, so you can distribute those to your teams, you can use them however you want, but you'll get that coming from me. Okay, let's do this. Oh, yay, that's awesome! I didn't even do it. Claps to you. I like that too. Okay, here is how the storytelling process breaks down. It really breaks down into 3 parts, okay? First you have to find stories, then you have to craft them, and then you have to tell them. Telling them is the easiest part. So let's start with finding stories. Now for you in this room, there's really 3 major categories of stories that you need to find. Obviously, you need stories about the product and the opportunity. Obviously, you're using stories on a daily basis to illustrate the lifestyle that this creates, okay? So you need stories about that. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, you need stories to be able to better lead your teams, to engage them, to motivate them, to teach them, to help them believe in themselves. And sometimes the best way to do that is by telling them stories, feeding them stories. So what I'd like to do for you here is give you a list of prompts, questions you can ask yourself, places you can look for all of the stories that are possible for being told. The first one is make a list of firsts. Our firsts are emotionally charged moments. So the first time do you get paid like on cards, or do they write you on cards? Check deposit, well, whatever. You know, if you got the check in the mail and you like saw this, it's kind of fun when people send you money. Okay, so the first time you actually saw that physical transformation in your body. Firsts are a great place to look for stories. Make a list of your customers and the coaches on your team. Sometimes just writing down their names helps bring back stories that you could tell to illustrate some of those messages. Make a list of their biggest challenges. This is a leadership technique. Do they struggle with time management? What story could you tell about the importance of time management? Do they struggle with that gap between reality and the work that, and their dreams and reality? Like, there's work in between, right? What stories can you tell them so that they understand the work that needs to go into it? The story of the one who got away. Isn't urgency an important part of this business to get them going right away? I have a story about this. So many years ago, I was going to build an empire. So I made a list of 100 people. And then I had this side list with one person on it, so a little chicken list. And I really wanted to call her because I knew she'd be amazing because she was just so perfect. But I didn't because it'd been a long time since we'd really talked. It'd been since like 5th grade. But I finally got up the guts to call Molly. And I called her and we caught up and it was so great. It was just like old times. I found her through MySpace, so this just shows you when this was. And throughout the conversation, I mentioned that I just started this new thing and I was so excited and I would love to have her on my team. And she said, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. I started this new thing a couple weeks ago and I would love to have you on my team. She had joined a different company like a couple days before I finally called her. If I had just called her when I knew I should have, she would have been on my team. And Molly has done very well in this business. So, the one that got away, call them right away, okay? A time when somebody said you couldn't, but you did anyway, the stories that are being told to your coaches and to the people they're trying to work with aren't always the best stories. So you need to be feeding them these stories of courage and of charting your own path. Any of those stories that you can find, you need to be telling. And then the last thing is make note of everyday moments. Little stories are happening all the time that can be used as lessons when you coach your team. I had one of these happen several years ago at the airport. I was in the bookstore, and I was looking at the trashy magazines. I was going to buy one. I was just looking at them, I swear. And there was a gentleman standing next to me. He was a plump gentleman, and he had 2 Snicker bars in his hands. He had the regular size and the king size one, and I could tell that he was like debating which one. And he finally put down the king-size Snicker bar. I was like, nice, like, that's good, it's progress, right? And he went to the counter, and the woman behind the counter said, oh, don't you want the king-size one? It's just a little bit more. And he put down the regular candy bar. He picked up the king-size, and he walked away. And it struck me as a moment that these small decisions are happening all the time. And it's our choice to have the courage to make the small decisions and know that they'll add up to something bigger. Okay? So everyday moments. All right, now let's talk briefly about crafting a story. And I don't want this to be really complicated. I want to keep it really simple. I mentioned earlier that a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I don't want you to think about it like that anymore. From now on, this is how you should think about your stories. Normal, explosion, new normal. Normal is what was happening, what you were struggling with, what the situation was, the scenario. Normal is where you include the emotions, you include the person. The explosion is the thing that happened, the decision. And the new normal is what is possible now. Where most stories go wrong is we start in the middle. And the middle doesn't matter unless you know the first part. So, for example, you had this woman that you were working with. She was frustrated. She wasn't feeling fulfilled. She wasn't getting recognized. She felt like she wasn't being compensated for everything that she was doing. And then she met you. And now she's super stoked. Look at her. She's getting awards. She's making some additional income. She's building a team. She can spend $104.50 and she gets to hang out with Bradley Cooper. Do you see him? Yeah, there he is. Okay. Here's the thing, none of that matters in the new normal when you're talking to new people unless they understand the normal, because that's where they're sitting, is the normal, right there. So start your stories there. All right, a few other rules. Set the scene, be vivid, include the emotions, include specific strategic details. Let me ask you, how many of you remember the wide elementary school hallways when I said that? Very specific. Spoiler alert, I'm going to say it one more time at the end of this presentation, just to wrap the whole thing up. When you get that specific, that's how those stories go deep, and that co-creative process gets flowing. All right, and lastly, you have to tell the story. Now, I'm sure you can tell that I believe storytelling. Stories is a lot like duct tape, or Windex, or sparkling rosé. I mean, it can solve all problems, basically. Like, it's just a little, take some. So, but here are a few specific places where you can be telling your stories. Social media, obviously. Remember that little bit of extra investment in telling the story versus like #bless is an effort that is worth your time. Your sneak peeks, what stories can you be telling there? Any virtual events that you have. What is the message you want to leave them with? What story could you tell? And then of course, one-on-one, in those individual moments when your team members need you. Not what information can you give them, what story can you tell them? But lastly, I think the most important story any of us can tell is the one we tell ourselves. I don't know about you, but sometimes being a business builder, owner, dreamer can be a little bit exhausting, right? Like you can be feeling so good and so excited and then really frustrated and irritated and challenged like within a 20-minute span. Like it is not, right? Like a couple phone calls. And if you're going through this, if I'm going through this, certainly your team is going through this, and sometimes we can get disconnected from the real reason that we're doing this. And in those moments, it's really important that you have a story that you can tell yourself to reconnect you to that greater purpose. Now, it might be something that's very business related. It might be something more personal. For me, I have that story. It's a story from a couple of years ago. I told you I've married, my husband is Michael. I have a son who's 7 and a daughter who just turned 6. My son's teacher, for example, was named Mrs. Barton. He wanted to call her Mrs. Barton. So, and my husband was okay with it. So I've got that, I'm dealing with that. And then my daughter, she just turned 6, but I was at an event in Las Vegas and wasn't going to be able to make it home in time. So we had her come here. So my daughter celebrated her 6th birthday poolside at the MGM Grand. Best mom or worst mom ever. It's still yet to be determined. See, my husband's hoping that it means that when she's like 21, she'll be like, Vegas is so when I'm 6. Like she won't want to go. I don't think that's how it's gonna work. But the story I have is from 3 years ago when I had been doing storytelling consulting work, but mostly I quit the job and I was a stay-at-home mom. And I had this feeling, like this sense, this calling, that maybe what I should be doing is spreading this storytelling message wider. Of course, that calling would mean taking me away from the other calling of being a wife and a mother. And I was struggling with this, I was thinking about this, as I was at home with my daughter playing on her bedroom floor with some blocks. And I don't know if any of you have daughters or know a daughter, but they can tell when you're distracted. It's just this thing that we can have, right? So all of a sudden I was thinking about this and my daughter said to me, Mama, we are building a castle. I said, right, of course there's some architectural issues with the castle, but yes, I see that this looks like a, and she said, and Mama, we live in this castle because we are 2 princesses. Oh, it's maybe a few too many Disney movies, but as long as I get to be Ariel, I'm fine. She's always Ariel, so it didn't matter, right? But then she looked at me, and she has this wild blonde hair and these big brown eyes that they just stay brown, but they so. she looked at me and she said, and it's a big castle, Mama, because we are 2 princesses who go to work. Now, she doesn't understand the connection between like mortgages and castles and work, that's. But I saw in my daughter's eyes, in that moment, that maybe, in addition to spreading the word about storytelling, I was teaching her to dream bigger. And that is a story I'm okay with telling. So what stories and what moments do you have that reconnect you to what you're really doing here. Because what you're really doing is great. All right, that is the storytelling process. This is how you get the slides. If it doesn't work for you, just send me an email, kindra@kindrahall.com, and I'll send them your way. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been through a lot here together. You now know why storytelling works so well, what a story actually is and what it isn't. Foolproof storytelling strategies to help you find, craft, and tell your stories. Because it is my hope that no matter what wide hallways you walk down, that no matter who is standing at your side or passes by, that you are dreaming big and building all the castles because you chose to tell your story. Thank you so much for the honor of being here with you. Thank you.
What am I supposed to say? That was just flat out good. I was sitting back there and then she